Canada has flipped the script on the North American steel trade. When Ottawa shut the tap on steel exports, it jolted the entire manufacturing chain in the United States. Detroit's auto assembly lines, once fueled by a steady supply of Canadian steel, suddenly faced a pricing shock. The ripple effect of this move is not just economic, it's political, environmental, and deeply strategic. The question now is whether this is a temporary disruption or a permanent shift in power dynamics across the continent. Ottawa's announcement came without the usual diplomatic caution. Canada made it clear. The steel that once flowed south in waves is now staying within its borders. Hot-rolled steel, pipes, profiles, and cold-rolled automotive-grade coils will now be prioritized for domestic use. Export quotas have been slashed, and for certain categories, removed entirely. The shift affects everything from Alberta's pipelines to British Columbia's wind turbines. Instead of supplying the U.S. market, Canadian steel will now be absorbed by domestic infrastructure and energy projects. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. The groundwork was laid years ago when President Trump imposed steep tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. At the time, Ottawa retaliated with symbolic tariffs on goods like whiskey and lawnmowers, but held back its real response, until now. This redirection of steel isn't just a defensive maneuver, it's an economic strategy. Last year, Canada produced about 14 million tons of steel, exporting nearly 5.5 million tons to the US. That trade brought in 7.3 billion Canadian dollars. But with a 30% US tariff in place, those exports have become financially unviable. Instead of chasing diminishing profits abroad, Ottawa is betting on growing domestic demand, and that bet is already paying off. Canada's steel belt, particularly around Hamilton, is running at full capacity. From infrastructure to clean energy, the demand for steel is rising. Liquid hydrogen plants, wind turbine projects, and a federally backed push for green construction have created a robust internal market. Ottawa has mandated that 60% of wind turbine components must be domestically sourced, turning Canadian steel into the backbone of the country's energy future. In Saskatchewan, farm equipment manufacturers argue that delivery speed now trumps price, helping them outpace U.S. rivals. Reports suggest that domestic demand will increase by at least 1 million tons by 2026. Meanwhile, Canadian steel unions are celebrating. After suffering job losses due to U.S. tariffs, they now see hope in Ottawa's steel-first policy. Plants that once closed lines due to pricing uncertainties are now hiring again. The federal government has earmarked $1.2 billion for carbon-neutral upgrades at steel mills, including electric arc furnace investments. These moves align environmental goals with economic revival, creating a win-win situation out of a trade dispute. But while Canada gains, the U.S. loses. In Detroit, automakers like Ford and Stellantis are paying more for steel, up to 30% more. The cost of a pickup truck body, once built affordably with Canadian sheet metal, has increased by hundreds of dollars. One analyst predicted the price of the Ford Bronco would rise by $1,800. That's a hit not just to the company but also to working-class buyers and factory workers. If sales drop, so do production shifts, and American jobs. Ironically, the protectionist policies intended to safeguard U.S. industries may end up hurting them. While Canada guarantees its workers' security, U.S. factories face higher input costs and uncertain market conditions. Legally, Ottawa's move is clever. There are no illegal subsidies or price manipulations, just a reordering of priorities. Canadian steel will be sold domestically first, and whatever remains can be exported. It's a phased, demand-driven model that complies with World Trade Organization rules. It mirrors Brazil's coffee export policy in the 1990s, where local consumers were served first before foreign buyers. This supply-side strategy avoids the protectionist label while delivering domestic benefits. It also sends a message: if the U.S. puts up a wall, Canada won't retaliate with one, but it will build a new set of rules. Now, with American tariffs raising costs, Canada is seizing the moment to diversify its trade. The European Union's new carbon border rules open a door. Canada's steel, produced with hydropower and electric furnaces, has a low carbon footprint. That makes it eligible for green-friendly export credits. Canada is actively offering Europe a green passport to its steel. This gives Ottawa leverage in EU markets while reducing dependency on the volatile U.S. trade relationship. It's a long-term pivot with both environmental and economic dividends. Domestically, not all responses are rosy. The Canadian Construction Association warns that rising steel prices could delay projects. To ease pressure, the government is increasing tax rebates for recycled scrap steel to 35%. Old bridges and structures will be melted down and reused to stabilize supply. This approach preserves domestic consumption while balancing environmental and budgetary concerns. Logistical challenges remain, but federal leaders are doubling down. In a televised speech, the economy minister declared, "Canadian steel must be valued on Canadian soil." He left the door open to Washington, saying that exports could resume if the tariff wall is lifted. But until then, Canada is keeping its leverage close. The consequences on the ground are already visible. In Ontario, a factory worker showed his payslip. After losing 20% of his income last year due to reduced shifts, he's now back to full-time work. Meanwhile, on the Michigan side, factories face an additional $6,000 per shipment in raw material costs. The automotive sector is especially price-sensitive, and if vehicle prices rise, consumer demand may drop. For every $1,000 increase in cost, sales can fall by 1.5%. That's a nightmare scenario for Trump's voter base in key states. The steel wall he built may not protect them after all. Environmentally, the shift is also profound. Canada's steel emissions currently account for 7% of national output. By switching to electric arc furnaces and encouraging scrap recycling, Ottawa can cut that by half. The government is funding 1/3 of these upgrades through grants, another third through loans, and the rest from private investors. It's a coordinated green transition plan, something Washington is still debating. Some exports will continue. High-end products like EV-grade sheet metal, nuclear pipe, and military-grade steel are exempt from domestic-first rules, but they will only be exported after priority projects are served. This system of phased exports allows for flexibility without sacrificing strategic control. Canada still depends heavily on the U.S. market, with 70% of its exports heading south. But this policy is a trial run for reducing that dependency. If successful, it could become a permanent part of Canada's trade doctrine. Even in the defense sector, the changes are significant. The Canadian Navy's next-generation icebreaker fleet will be built using domestic steel. Experts estimate that flat steel demand from defense projects alone will offset 15% of the export revenue loss. This further connects the policy to national security and industrial strength. In essence, Canada has responded to Washington's tariffs not with anger, but with ambition. Rather than building a wall, it built a staircase, one step at a time, toward energy security, economic independence, and climate leadership. The North American trade game is changing. Canada is no longer just a supplier, it's now a strategist. The world is watching.